I first bought my house, it felt like a dream come true. It was everything I had ever wanted. A place of my own, where I could finally have the freedom and independence I'd craved for so long. I remember the day I signed the papers, standing in the empty living room, just basking in the joy of it all. The smell of fresh paint, the sound of my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. Everything seemed perfect. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, full of potential and excitement. At first, everything was normal. I spent my days moving in, decorating, and settling into my new life. Friends and family would come over, offering congratulations and commenting on how beautiful the place was. I felt proud, happy, like I had finally arrived. But then, after a few weeks, I began to notice small, strange things happening around the house. At first, they were easy to dismiss. Things like the remote control being on the couch when I was sure I had left it on the coffee table, or a door being open that I distinctly remembered closing. Minor things, nothing alarming, just enough to make me question myself. I chalked it up to the stress of the move, being in a new place, and maybe just not paying attention. But the occurrences didn't stop. In fact, they seemed to escalate. One night, I was getting ready for bed when I noticed that my keys, which I always kept in a bowl by the door, were on the kitchen counter. I distinctly remembered placing them in the bowl when I came home that evening. I stared at them for a moment, confused, but brushed it off again. A few days later, I came home from work and found the lights on in the living room. I hadn't left them on, and I live alone, so there was no one else who could have turned them on. That was when I started to feel uneasy. It was one thing for me to misplace objects, but this felt deliberate. I started paying more attention, being more careful about where I left things. But the strange occurrences continued. Books would be pulled slightly out of the shelf. My shoes would be facing the wrong direction, and picture frames on the wall would be slightly askew. I mentioned it to a friend one night over dinner, more as a joke than anything. She teased me, saying maybe the house was haunted, and we both laughed it off. I didn't believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, so the idea seemed ridiculous. But then, things started to happen that I couldn't laugh off. One night, I was sitting in my living room, watching TV, when I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. It was a shadow, darting quickly across the wall. At first, I thought it was just the light playing tricks on me. But then, I saw it again, this time clearer. It was a distinct shape, humanoid, but darker than any shadow I had ever seen. It moved quickly, disappearing into the hallway. My heart was pounding. I turned off the TV and sat in silence, listening for any sound, any indication that someone or something was there. But there was nothing, just silence. I told myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew what I had seen. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like something was in the house with me. Over the next few days, I saw them again. The shadow people. They would appear out of the corner of my eye, moving quickly, always just on the periphery of my vision. Sometimes they would be in the hallway, other times in the living room or the kitchen. They never made a sound, never got too close, but their presence was undeniable. I started to feel uneasy in my own home. I would rush through my nightly routine, avoiding dark corners and keeping all the lights on. I dreaded going to bed, knowing that the moment I turned off the lights, I would feel that oppressive sense of being watched. Some nights, I would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that someone was standing in the doorway, only to turn on the light and find nothing there. One night, things escalated. I had just gotten into bed, turning off the lamp on my nightstand, when I saw them. Two shadow figures standing at the foot of my bed. They were darker than the room itself, like voids of light, their forms vaguely human, but featureless. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just lay there, paralyzed with fear, my heart racing in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, they slowly faded away, disappearing into the darkness. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I called my friend, the one who had joked about the house being haunted, and told her what had happened. She came over later that day, bringing sage to cleanse the house, but I could tell she didn't really believe me. I didn't care. I just wanted some kind of peace, some relief from the terror that had taken hold of my life. After that night, things quieted down for a while. I still saw the shadows from time to time, but they didn't come as close, and I no longer felt the suffocating presence I had before. But I know they're still there, lurking in the corners of my home, watching, waiting. I've tried to research shadow people, to understand what they are, but there's no clear answer. Some say they're spirits. Others believe they're interdimensional beings. All I know is that they're real, and they're in my house. Living with them has become my new normal. I don't talk about it with friends or family anymore. They wouldn't understand. But every night, before I go to bed, I check every room, every corner, and leave a light on, just in case. I never used to believe in ghosts, or anything supernatural for that matter. The concept of shadow people was laughable to me until they started appearing in my home. It began about 3 months ago, shortly after I moved into a small, old house on the outskirts of town. The rent was cheap, and the place had a certain charm despite its age. The first time I saw one, I was lying in bed, half asleep. My bedroom door was open, and I could see the hallway clearly. There, just outside the door, stood a dark figure. It was human-shaped, but entirely black, as if it were made of pure shadow. I blinked, thinking it was just my tired eyes playing tricks on me, but it didn't disappear. It just stood there, watching me. I must have stared at it for a full minute, frozen in place, before I finally convinced myself it was just a trick of the light or my imagination. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was fully awake, and the figure was closer. I could feel its presence, like it was draining the warmth from the room. I couldn't make out any features, just a silhouette, darker than the surrounding darkness. As the days passed, the shadow people multiplied. I would catch glimpses of them out of the corner of my eye, only for them to vanish when I turned my head. Sometimes, I would wake up in the middle of the night to find one standing at the foot of my bed, its featureless head tilted as if it were studying me. Other times, I would hear faint whispers, too quiet to understand, but enough to scare the crap out of me. I stopped sleeping with the lights off. I tried to ignore them, tried to tell myself that it was all in my head, but they didn't go away. In fact, they became bolder. I would feel cold clammy hands brush against my skin when I walked through the house. I would hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. Just that oppressive darkness, thicker and heavier than it should have been. One night, I woke up to find a shadow person standing right beside my bed, its face inches from mine. I could feel its breath on my skin, even though it didn't have a mouth. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything but stare into that black void where its eyes should have been. It felt like it was sucking the life out of me, like it was feeding on my fear. I don't know how long I lay there, paralyzed, before it finally backed away and disappeared into the shadows. That was the last straw. I started sleeping during the day and staying awake at night, too terrified to close my eyes in the dark. But even that didn't stop them. They're always there, just out of sight, just waiting. I'm writing this now because I don't know how much longer I can take it. I've tried everything. Moving, burning sage, even calling a priest. But nothing works. They're getting closer, more aggressive. Sometimes I catch them whispering to each other, like they're planning something. I can't understand what they're saying, but I know it's about me. I don't think they're just shadows. I think there's something else, something malevolent. And I think they're getting ready to take me. If you're reading this, please, don't let the darkness in your home grow too deep. Don't ignore the things you see out of the corner of your eye. And whatever you do, don't let them know you're afraid. Because once they know, they'll never leave you alone. When I first moved into my new house, it felt like the ultimate fresh start. The house was old, but charming, with creaky wooden floors and large windows that let in an abundance of light during the day. I was excited, full of plans for decorating and making the space my own. I had always dreamed of owning a home like this, something with character, history, and a sense of permanence. Little did I know, that same history would soon begin to haunt me in ways I never imagined. At first, everything was perfect. I spent the first few weeks unpacking, organizing, and getting to know the place. I had a few friends over for dinner, and we all admired the unique details of the house, the old-fashioned molding, the stained glass windows, and the ornate fixtures. There was something special about the place, like it had its own personality. It felt like home almost immediately, but not long after, strange things started to happen. It began subtly, with little things I could easily explain away. I'd leave my phone on the kitchen counter, only to find it later on the coffee table. Or I'd come home to find a door slightly ajar that I knew I had closed before leaving. At first, I just thought I was being forgetful. After all, moving into a new place can be disorienting, right? I'd laugh it off, telling myself I just wasn't used to my new routines yet. But then, the incidents became harder to dismiss. I remember one evening, I had come home from work and noticed that a book I had left on my nightstand was now on the floor. Not just lying on the floor, but standing upright, open to a random page. I stood there, staring at it for a long moment, trying to recall if maybe I had knocked it over that morning. But no, I hadn't even touched the book that day. A chill ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was nothing. A breeze, perhaps, or I had somehow knocked it over without realizing. Then came the night when I heard footsteps upstairs. I was downstairs, watching TV, when I heard it. Soft, deliberate steps, moving slowly across the floor above me. At first, I thought it might be the house settling, or maybe a neighbor outside. But then I remembered. I didn't have any upstairs neighbors. The sound was coming from inside the house, my house. I paused the TV, listening intently. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was silence, and I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. But then, they started again, this time moving towards the staircase. My heart raced as I grabbed the nearest object, a kitchen knife, and crept towards the stairs. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I slowly ascended the stairs, knife in hand. When I reached the top, there was nothing. The rooms were empty. The windows were closed. But I knew what I had heard. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside made me jump. But the real terror didn't begin until a few nights later, when I saw them for the first time. The shadow people. It was late, past midnight, and I was lying in bed, struggling to fall asleep. I had left the door to my bedroom slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see the faint light from the hallway. I rolled over, trying to get comfortable, when I noticed something odd. A shadow moved across the hallway, blocking out the light for a brief moment. I sat up, staring at the door, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. I waited, holding my breath, but nothing happened. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. The next night, I saw it again. This time, it wasn't just a flicker of movement. It was a tall, dark figure standing in the hallway, its form barely visible against the dim light. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching. I couldn't see any features, no face, no eyes, just a silhouette of pure darkness. I was frozen in place, unable to move or even scream. I must have stared at it for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes, before it finally disappeared, melting back into the shadows. From that night on, the shadow people became a constant presence in my home. They were always just out of sight, lurking in the corners of rooms, slipping past doorways, or hovering in the hallway. They never got too close, but they were always there, watching. I tried to ignore them, tried to convince myself it was just stress, or that I was imagining things. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of never being truly alone. One night, I woke up suddenly, my room bathed in darkness. I lay there, disoriented, trying to figure out what had woken me. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was the same dark, featureless shape I had seen before, but this time, it was closer. Much closer. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just lay there, staring at it as it stood motionless, looming over me. I don't know how long it stayed there. Minutes, hours. Time seemed to stretch and warp as I lay frozen in fear. Eventually, it faded away, dissolving into the shadows. But the fear it left behind lingered. After that, I started to dread the nights. I began sleeping with the lights on, leaving music playing in the background to drown out the silence. I even considered selling the house, but something about it kept me tied to the place, despite the fear. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the hope that whatever was haunting me would eventually leave. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't. The shadow people are still there. They don't appear as often as they used to, but I know they're watching. Sometimes, late at night, I'll catch a glimpse of them in the reflection of a window, or hear the soft sound of footsteps when I'm alone. I've learned to live with them, in a way. I don't know what they are, or what they want, but I've come to accept that they're a part of my life now. It's strange, really. I bought this house to build a life of my own, to feel a sense of stability and security. But instead, I found myself sharing it with something I can't explain, something that defies reason. I don't know if the shadow people will ever leave, or if I'll ever truly feel at home here. But for now, I stay, hoping that one day I'll wake up and they'll be gone.